3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Meet the Money. I've got Greg from CohnReznick with me. And what are your thoughts on Meet the Money so far, Greg?
So, Craig, it's been a very good conference. I mean, I think when you look at the industry and where we are and, coming out of the first quarter of the year and some of the noise that's out there in the economy, right? I think a lot of people have wondered what it's going to mean to the industry. A lot of things we've heard about, inbound traffic into the U.S. for this summer. The U.S. has always been a larger exporter of, travelers out of the U.S. than inbound traffic into the U.S. What does, the current situation, what does that mean for the industry? I've looked at it from the perspective of, a lot of the numbers suggest that the Canadian travelers probably aren't going to come this year because of, the turmoil with the tariffs. I was at another hotel conference back in March, and, a lot of the people at the conference, talking about their own personal travel, I think you're going to find that a lot of Americans also might not be comfortable themselves traveling abroad.
Yeah.
So I think, although people feel like there's a lot of noise, I think because of that kind of uncertainty, we might see what we saw in COVID times, which is Americans staying at home.
Right.
And with Americans staying at home and that large large group of them staying here, I think the numbers and the metrics might actually work out fine compared to what people are thinking.
I agree with you. I think it's going to be the Great American Road Trip 2.0.
Absolutely. That's a good way to put it.
And, it's my son's going to be 44 this year.
Okay.
So I had to have the talk with him. I said, "Are you leaving the country?" Hey, I said, "I'd prefer you don't. You also got to, my grandson's about ready to turn 9.
There you go.
I said, right now, take him, do the road trip through the Western U.S.
Yep.
Go camping, go do this, go do that. And, end your trip, begin your trip and end your trip at a great hotel with a lot of amenities so my grandson can have some fun and not be dirty the whole time." So
we looked, my wife and I looking at travel opportunities as well. Our initial plan was to fly to Las Vegas and then do a trip to both Zion and Bryce.
There you go.
But the reality was we couldn't find a spot.
Yeah.
I mean, hotels, because it's we talked about, in the prior panel, they were talking about, doing rural deals, and national parks can be a great opportunity to do rural hotel development. And trust me, they need it near Bryce and Zion. There's not a lot of product, and they were completely booked for all summer. There wasn't a spot to be had.
And it's funny that you bring that up because there is a very advantageous loan program through SBA for those rural markets based on population.
Yeah.
So, I think, that could be a glimmer of gold.
I think so. I liked your idea that it's the Roadshow 2.0. I think you're going to see similar to what we saw in COVID. Maybe not as crazy because of the there's still opportunity to travel.
Right.
But I do believe people will feel maybe a little bit more, a little less comfortable. Additionally, one of the other things, we talked about and we've seen throughout the conference is, there is money out there to be lent.
Yep.
There's equity out there to be invested.
Yep.
Deals can get done.
Yep.
I think somebody put it very well earlier that everybody believes interest rates are high. Well, they are compared to 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But historically, they're about middle of the road. If you were to look at a bell curve, they're dead in the middle of the bell curve.
Exactly.
They're not 1977 rates, but they're also not going to be.
Do you remember what they were in 77?
Yeah, I mean, I remember my parents when they bought a house. I remember their interest rate on the house they bought in 1977, 78 was like 14.5%.
Yeah. They got up to 16.5.
Yeah. I remember like 14.5 if I remember correctly.
I've always been of a mind that if my interest rate is single digits, that's a good thing, okay? Because I lived through that.
Yeah.
And it's like, 08 was something different.
Sure.
Okay? But what happens? You cannot seize the market up like that. You've got to be able to be creative and get things done. So private equity, ground leases, land contracts, all-inclusive trust deeds, all those things came into play. Some of them morphed over to commercial and stayed there.
Yeah.
And others just kind of evaporated as time went by. But it's always about looking at that interest rate, and you're not married to the interest rate. You're married to the property, hopefully.
Hopefully. No, I mean, one of the things, for us as a public accounting firm, we specialize in tax incentivized real estate. And we specialize in, the programs such as the New Markets Tax Credit Program and the federal and state historic programs that exist throughout the country. And those alternative financing opportunities really do, allow for unique properties to get done. Those that, may not pencil out, to what most underwriters would look at. So instead of 65 or 70% loan to value, the risk might be a little greater because it might be a historic property that's in a gentrifying area. And, the sponsor's going to probably need to do a hold that's 10 years. And the lender's not necessarily sure, so they might be at 55, which makes that capital stack grow a little bit more. And these tax incentivized, opportunities like historic tax credits can be monetized and bring that additional funding into the deal to get them done. And so I think when you look at everything we're seeing right now with the volatility and with the uncertainty and with interest rates where they are, but capital on the side, I think deals can get done, but they're going to need to be structured appropriately. They're going to be a little bit more complex than most people are used to. And the key is that when you have that kind of complex capital stack, that everyone in that stack understands the deal, they understand what they're putting in and what they're getting out, and ultimately structuring it so when it all does come to an end and people, are taken out in a refinance or a sale, that hopefully what you projected 5 or 7 years before looks somewhat like what actually happened.
Exactly. It may not be 100%.
But it looks a little bit.
But you're like 97,
Correct.
I'm good.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm good. And I love your idea about the historical tax credits too. We, our deal of the year this year on the full service side was the Fairmont in Long Beach.
Okay.
And that building turns, I think, 126 or 125 years old next year.
There you go.
So it was restored back to its former glory. And a lot of it was because of tax credits as well.
And here in the state of California, they have now a state tax credit as well, historic tax credit. And so when you have states that, have a program, a historic program that can be blended in with a federal program, the two together can generally bring potentially somewhere around 22 to 26% of the capital stack if done and monetized appropriately. And what it does is, as I said, you find like there aren't a lot of diamonds in the rough anymore. Like if you're out looking for value in a hotel, right? With the Great Recession in 2007 and 8, the people who were bad hotel owners, they're gone.
They're gone.
Everybody who's left is a really good hotel owner. So to try to find that value is a little bit tough. So what we see when that gets a little bit tougher is people start looking at those opportunities with those areas where, again, that gentrification, that old area that has that historic stock that needs to be revitalized. Now, the great thing is the value's there because you can be on the ground floor of the gentrification. Now, it might be a 10-year hold. Right. May not be 7, may not be 5. But
let's make it 10 or 15.
But we've seen the value to be there in those later years.
Love it. Greg, thank you for joining me
Craig,
today.
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I'd love to get you on the long form show. It's about a half hour.
I would love to.
You've got my contact information.
Yes, I do.
Reach out to me,
I will.
and we'll get you booked. Love to have you on.
Craig, that's a pleasure. I absolutely would love to.
Great.
And thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.